Ito yung latest natin na module, no? 9, 10, and 11. Tama ba? So, let's start with, yung mga basic na mga terms. Kindly open your module. Module 9. Determining the relationship between the hypothesis and the conclusion of an if-then statement. So let's start with this one, Module 9, page 6. Okay? So when we say conditional statement, class, a conditional statement, or it is also known as the if-then statement. So kapag sinabi natin conditional statement, tinatawag din siya na if-then statement. And it is composed of two clauses. We have the if clause, okay, as you can see there, and then the then clause. And the P clause there, or the if clause rather, is always denoted by P. Okay? Take note, the if clause is always denoted by P, and the then clause is denoted by Q. Okay? We call that symbols for if-then statement. Again, if we're going to use symbols for the if-then statement, we usually use P for the if clause and then Q for the then clause. Okay? And the statement is in the form if P then Q. So, pino-form natin yung dalawang statements na yon in the form if P then Q. But you have to remember, class, that conditional statements are not always in the form if then. Sometimes or more often, wala silang if tsaka wala silang then. Pero we can consider them as conditional statement still. Later, we'll have an example. Also, the P statement is called the hypothesis. Okay? Yung P statement natin sa if P, so eto tinatawag natin to na hypothesis. And then the Q part here is what we call the conclusion. Okay? Tinatawag natin yan siya na conclusion. So let us have some example. So we have here the two statements. Input, dito tinawag niya na input. I studied for my math test, and then the output, I got a good grade. So if we're going to form this with the if-then form, so magiging ano siya, if I studied for my math test, then I got a good grade. Okay? So this statement here, after the if, is what we call the hypothesis. Okay, ito yung tinatawag natin na hypothesis. And then, the statement after the then is what we call the conclusion. Okay? And then, another example, it is raining, so we need to use our umbrella. So if we're going to form this as an if-then statement, if it is raining, then we need to use our umbrella. Okay, so as simple as that. Let's go to your worksheet, di ba? In your worksheet, Part A, identify the conclusion and the hypothesis of each conditional statement. So all you need to do is underline uh, the hypothesis part, and then you're going to box in the final the conclusion rather. And next, as I've said earlier, not all conditional statements is in if-then form. So sometimes they are in usual form. Nasa usual form lang sila. For example, like this one. Isulat ko lang ha. Um, cigarettes smoking is, this is an example, is dangerous to your health. This one. So as you can see, wait. So as you can see, this statement actually, or this sentence actually is not in if-then form. Pero, we can still call this one a conditional statement. So, if the statement is not in if-then form, you need to transform or rewrite this one into if-then form. Dagdagan nyo lang siya. So, for example, if we're going to write this in if-then form, magiging if, take note when we say cigarette, meaning, who is smoking? Sino yung nagsusmoke dito? Imposible naman na animals, di ba? So, we are talking about a person. So, kapag ganito siya, if it involves actually person or people, so, pwede natin siyang isulat if a person, we need to be specific. If a person is smoking, that's it. Then, it is dangerous to his health. Okay? Are you following? Are you following, class? So aside from a person actually, this phrase, we can use if you are. Okay? We can use if you are smoking, then it is dangerous to your health. Okay? So, these are the two possible if-then statements. Both are correct, ha? So, if a person and then if you are. Okay? And then, so, identify the hypothesis statement. So, as I've said earlier, yung hypothesis statement actually follows after the word if. So, therefore, the hypothesis statement here is if you are smoking. This one. So, this is the hypothesis part. And then, the conclusion part is the statement after the word then. So, therefore, ito yung conclusion. So, tulad ng sinabi ko earlier sa directions, underline the hypothesis part and then box in the conclusion part. That's it. Yan. I-box in nyo lang siya. Okay. So, naiintindihan? Okay, another example. Another example is a segment has exactly one midpoint. Okay? So, a segment has exactly one midpoint. So, just like our first example, it is not in if-then form. So, if we're going to write this as an if-then form statement, or as an if-then statement, rather, we are talking about a segment here. So, we could have if it is a segment. If we are talking about things in general, so we can simply refer it as it is. If it is a segment, then it has exactly one midpoint. Okay? So this is actually the if-then form. Let's check your, yes, if-then form. And the hypothesis here is if it is a segment, and the conclusion is then it has exactly one midpoint. Do you follow? Okay, that's good. Then let's move on to the truth table. But actually, it is not included in your worksheet, yung truth table. I'm planning to have this one sa next pan actually na worksheet. Pero since andito naman siya sa module nyo, so i-discuss na lang natin siya kaagad. So the truth table. How do we form actually the truth table? So as you can see here, eto, so the first column here is the hypothesis statement or the if clause. And then the second column here is the conclusion part. And then the third column here actually is the truth value na tinatawag. And then the symbol here, etong symbol na to na arrow heading to the right, that is actually a symbol for then. So, binabasa natin to na P then Q. P then Q, or P implies Q. Another term for then is implies. So, P implies Q. Makinig maigi . So, nakukuha natin yung ganong table sa concept na tree diagram. Are you familiar with the tree diagram? Familiar kayo sa tree diagram? So, meron tayong dalawang truth value, di ba? So, the statement actually can either be true or false. And this one will branch out into two, true and then false. And this one is also true or false. And then we have here the P, Q, and then P, then Q, or P implies Q. Kung paano tayo nag-arrive kanina sa table na yung kanina. So, dito lang natin yung kinuha yon. Yung una, true, true. So, we have here true or T and then T. The next one is T and then F. So, we have T and then F. The third one, we have F here and then we have T. False or false and true. This one. Okay. And the last one, we have F and F or both false. That's it. Nasusundan niyo? Okay. Very good. And then, how do we determine the truth value? Paano natin dinidetermine yung truth value? So, balik tayo dun sa module nyo earlier. Okay, nakikita nyo, ang truth value dito is true, false, true, and then true. So, how do we determine the truth value? Binabase natin yun sa conclusion part kapag if-then statement siya. If the conclusion is true, then the truth value is true. Meaning, the truth value of the statement is true. It holds true. If the conclusion is false, then it is false. Again, if the conclusion is true, then it is true. Then, if both are false, if the hypothesis is false and the conclusion is false, therefore it is true. Okay? Are you following? Yun ang ibig sabihin nun. Pero kung dalawang ano lang kasi siya, dalawang statements, yung if tsaka then, so apat lang yan actually. But it could be possible na tatlo. Pero ano na yon? Another case. Kasi gumagamit na doon yun ng mga logical operators, yung or and then and. But in this lesson, hindi natin siya itatouch muna. Okay, importante na susundan nyo how did we arrive at the truth table earlier. Okay? So that's it. So, if we're going to consider the first example we had earlier, if I studied for math test, then I got a good grade. So let us analyze if the statement is logical. If I studied for math test, so it's possible that you are going to you are studying your lessons, right? So then, is the conclusion logical? If you're going to study your math test, then you will have, or you will get rather, a good grade. Tama ba? Yes. So, it's possible that you study your math test. So, the hypothesis part here is true. Eto, true to siya. And then, if you studied your math test, then it's possible that you will get a good grade. So, the conclusion is also true. So, if both the hypothesis and the conclusion are true, therefore, the truth value of this statement is true. So, andito siya sa first na to. The hypothesis is true. The conclusion is true. Therefore, the truth value of the statement is also true. Understood? Okay? Same with this one. Number 2, if it is raining, then we need to use our umbrella. So it's possible that it's raining. So the hypothesis is true. Then the conclusion, if it's raining, then you have to use your umbrella. So the conclusion part as well is true. So both the hypothesis and the conclusion are true. Therefore, the truth value is true. That's it. So if two lines form right angles, madali na siguro to. Na-discuss na natin to, di ba? It's quite easy. So the hypothesis part is if two lines form right triangles, and then the conclusion part, then the lines are perpendicular. Paano natin masabi na ang conclusion is false? How can we say that the conclusion actually is false? So, by providing a counterexample, uh, the best way to do that is to mention or to cite a theorem or axiom, most especially if we are dealing with geometrical figures. Yung mga ano ba, sa geometry, yung mga triangles, circles, quadrilaterals. So, we can actually determine if the statement or the conclusion, particularly, if it's true or false by citing counterexamples. Just like this one. If two lines form right angles, then the lines are perpendicular. 'Di ba? Sa geometry natin, kapag ang dalawang lines nagfo-form ng right angles, so meaning the two lines are perpendicular. Just like sa Cartesian plane, the two number lines actually are perpendicular to each other. So if they are perpendicular to each other, therefore, the angles formed is a right angle. Yun ang ibig sabihin nun. So same with this one. So number 4, if an angle measures 20 degrees, then it is acute. So recall the definition of acute, meaning we call an angle acute angle if its measure is less than 90 degrees. Since 20 degrees is less than 90 degrees, then the conclusion is true. It is an acute angle. For instance, ibahin natin. If an angle measures 20 degrees, then it is an obtuse angle. Or it is an obtuse, rather. So, the conclusion is false. Di ba? Kasi 20 degrees ang given na angle, pero ang conclusion niya, obtuse angle daw siya. So, therefore, the conclusion is false. In that case, mafo-fall siya doon sa eto. True, false, and then the truth value is false. Kasi ang conclusion natin is false. Understood? Okay. Number 5. Ang sinasay ko lang dito yung example on how to tell whether the conclusion is the hypothesis or the conclusion is false or true. If a figure is a square, then it is a quadrilateral. We know for a fact that a square has 4 sides. Right? Kapag sinabi natin square, rectangle, ano pa ba? Mga rhombus na yan. So they are actually 4-sided polygons. In general, we call them quadrilateral. From the word itself, quad. Quad means 4. Okay? The prefix here, quad, means 4. So if a figure is a square, so it's possible that we have a square figure. So the hypothesis here is true. And the conclusion, then it is a quadrilateral. The conclusion here is also true since it is a four-sided polygon and we call it quadrilateral. So the conclusion here is also true. Therefore, the truth value is true. What if kung sinabi nating if a figure is a triangle, then it is a quadrilateral. Do you think we have a correct conclusion? What do you think? No. Because when we say triangle, how many sides do we have? 3. So the conclusion is false because it is quadrilateral daw. So the conclusion is false. So what is the truth value then? True or false? Come again? Are you sure? Again binago ko yung statement, di ba? Yung hypothesis natin is, if a figure is a triangle, binago ko yung square. Instead of square, I change it to triangle. So, if a figure is a triangle, then it is a quadrilateral. So, the hypothesis is true or false? If a figure is a triangle, it is not possible to have a triangle as a figure. Hindi pa possible na may triangle tayo na figure? Possible. So therefore, the hypothesis is true. However, do we have a correct conclusion? Then it is a quadrilateral? No, the conclusion actually is false, right? And if the conclusion is false, the truth value of the statement is what? False. False ang truth value ng statement kasi ang conclusion niya is false. This is actually the basic of yung mga ginagamit sa mga argument ng mga abogado kapag nag-aano sila ng kanilang mga premise, kapag nag-argue sila. So, it is very necessary that they are good in logic. Okay? Kung paano maging logical ang kanilang mga statements. Ginagamit kasi natin to sa pag-provide ng proof, sa proving actually, ang ganitong klase ng mga statements. So again, if a figure is a triangle, the hypothesis is true, and the conclusion, then it is quadrilateral, is false. Because a triangle has 4 sides. Hindi siya quadrilateral. Kaya nga siya tri. The word tri means 3. It is a 3-sided polygon. Okay? And let's have number 6. If a number is a whole number, then it is an integer. Is the hypothesis true? Yes. It's very possible to have a whole number. So the hypothesis part is true. How about the conclusion? Then it is an integer. When we say integer, meaning it has no fractional part, meaning whole number pa rin siya, integer. So do you think the conclusion is true? True. Therefore, the truth value is what? True. Very good. So ang truth value din niya is true. Andito siya sa table na eto. True, true, and then true. Okay? Example, if pigs can fly, then 2 plus 5 equals 7. So, yung hypothesis niya, pigs can fly. So, automatically, pigs or a pig cannot fly, right? So, that's impossible. So, therefore, the hypothesis is false. The conclusion, 2 plus 5 is equal to 7, which is true. Okay? So, yung conclusion part niya dito is true. What do you think will be the truth value of the statement? True or false? True. Since the conclusion is true. Let's have this one. Well, anyway, you have an answer there in your module. Let's have activity 3. Let's evaluate. So directions, evaluate the following statements. Use the truth table below. If a shape is a triangle, then it is a polygon. Do you have any clarification, class? Or question maybe before we move on to our next topic? Anyone?
Paano po to, sir, sa ano?
Sa,
After sheet, sir.
sa?
Sir, sheet.
What about answer sheet?
Paano po to
Ano?
yung conditional contra
Okay. Yan actually yung sunod natin na topic. Eto ba yung ano na to? Yung... Eto yung last one? Sige, sige. Mag-ano lang tayo ng example. Nakikita nyo naman, no? Eto, na maigi. Okay. Excuse me. So, given for example, the statement, good citizens obey rules and regulations. Okay. So, given this statement, class, good citizens obey rules and regulations. So, since this statement actually is not in if-then form, so we need to transform this or write this into if-then form first. So, who are the good citizens? Meaning we are referring to people, right? Since if we are referring to people, so if you recall earlier, we can use if a person or if you are. So if you are a good citizens, then you obey rules and regulations. So that's one possible if-then statement. The other one is if a person is a good citizen, therefore he or she obey rules and regulations. Sige, gawa ko ng table. Ito. So, meron tayo ditong conditional statement. Conditional. Take note, class, na yung if-then statement is simply the conditional statement. Ano nga yung sunod? the converse, inverse, and then the contrapositive. So we have here the converse, inverse, and then the contrapositive. That's it. Pero bago to, i-simplify muna natin how do we write the different variations or implications. Gawa tayo dito ng another table. I'm sorry. Ito, kopyahin lang natin pala. Oops, sorry. Ayan. So, kung yung conditional natin, di ba yung conditional natin is if P, then Q. Di ba yan? Sa converse, binabaliktad lang natin. If Q, yung conclusion mo magiging hypothesis. If Q, then P. That's it. Are you following? Babaliktarin lang natin siya. Sa conditional statement, we have if P, then Q. Sa converse statement, yung conclusion natin, gagawin natin siyang hypothesis. And then, yung conclusion natin, yung hypothesis natin rather, gagawin natin siyang conclusion. And then the inverse, kapag sinabi nating inverse, we negate. Kapag sinabi nating negate, binabaliktad natin siya by using the word not. Okay? Binabaliktad natin siya. If it's positive, magiging negative. Okay? So, if not P, then not Q. Binabaliktad lang natin siya. Pero depende yun sa words, for example, yung verb is send rather. So, kung inegate natin siya, kabaliktaran ng send, meaning, or sent rather, kabaliktaran nun, unsent. Ano mo lang siya, ninegate mo siya. Just like true, false. False, true. Not polygon. Polygon meaning not polygon. And we have yung inverse form lang ng converse pero ninegate natin siya. Ang inverse andito siya sa conditional pero we negated the statement. The contrapositive actually is the negation of the converse statement. That means if not Q, then not P. Are you following? Naiintindihan?
Yes po, sir.
Okay. So, balik tayo sa statement kanina. Let's follow this format. Ito yung susundan natin. Good citizens obey rules and regulations. First, we're going to transform this into if-then statement. That means, again, we are talking about citizens, meaning we are talking about people in general. So, we can use you are or if a person. So, in this case, let us use person. If a person, or you are na lang para parang mas ano. If you are a good or good citizen than you, because you use the word you, then you are, you obey rather, I'm sorry. You obey rules and regulations. That's it. Litan natin ng konti. Then, the converse statement follows this form. The conclusion becomes the hypothesis, and the hypothesis becomes the conclusion. That means, if you obey rules and regulations, then you are a good citizen. Are you following? Nasusundan? Okay. Then, let's move on to the inverse statement. Take note na yung inverse statement natin actually is taken from the conditional statement. Ito. The only difference is that we only negate the statement. Dito, you are a good citizen. What is the negation of a good citizen? Bad, not necessarily bad, yes, but we can actually make it not good citizen, right? Sometimes we do not have to use the word bad actually. So if you are not a good citizen, then we also negate the conclusion part. If you are not a good citizen, therefore, what? Yes. Very good. Then you do not obey rules and regulations. That's it. Then let's go to the contrapositive. Again, the contrapositive actually is simply the negation of the converse statement. Negation lang siya ng converse statement. So in this case, if you do not obey rules and regulations, then you are not a good citizen. As simple as that. Are you following? Okay? Tingnan natin yung truth value nila, ha? Tingnan natin yung truth value. Gawa tayo ng table dito. Let's get the truth value of the conditional statement. So the hypothesis, P, Q, and then P, then Q. Isos, P, then Q. Okay? Yan. Number 1 muna. Small letters, yan class, ha? So, is the hypothesis true if you are a good citizen? What is the truth value of the hypothesis? If you are a good citizen, what is the truth value? True or false? True. So, number one muna tayo ha. Ito number one. Yung conditional statement to. So, the hypothesis is true. If you are a good citizen, then you obey rules and regulation. Is the conclusion correct? Yes, true. So therefore, the conclusion here is true. The truth value is true. Although wala pa naman to na part. Maybe sa next. Okay? How about the converse? If you obey rules and regulations, so is it possible for a person to obey rules and regulation? Yes. Possible naman. Ano muna natin to? Ito yung number one. At true pa rin yung hypothesis mo. Then, if you obey rules and regulation, your conclusion, or our conclusion rather, you are a good citizen. So, the conclusion is still true. Then, this is also true. How about the inverse? If you are not a good citizen, so it's possible that if we have a good citizen, we also have some actually are also not a good citizen, right? So that's a fact actually. So the hypothesis is still true. And if a person is not a good citizen, therefore, it is possible, or it's possible that he do not obey rules and regulations. True. So the truth value is still true. How about the contrapositive? If you do not obey rules and regulations rather, it should be parallel. So which is true, then you are not a good citizen. The conclusion is also true, and the truth value is true. Ayan. So that means all the truth values of the different variations, iisa lang yung value which is true. Kapag pareho ang truth value ng lahat ng implications niya, tinatawag natin to na tautology. Kapag pareho. Meaning, in all cases, kapag binabaliktad-baliktarin yung statement ng isang tao at ang truth value ng statement niya ay lahat true. Therefore, tinatawag natin yun na tautology. Understood? Okay. That's it. Let's have another example. This time kayo nang kayo nang gumawa. Another example or kayo nang gagawa next? Okay, another example. The sum of the measures of complementary angles is 90 degrees. So 90 degrees. Pwede tayo lang ng symbol lang sa taas. Ano ba? Exponent 90 degrees. Ayan, 90 degrees. So pwede namang word. So the sum of the measures of complementary angles is 90 degrees. Do you still recall complementary angles? Anyone? Natatandaan nyo ba yung complementary um, angles? So, ibig sabihin parang hindi na. So, when we say complementary angles, meaning, when the two angles are added actually, the sum is 90 degrees. Kapag inad natin yung dalawang angles, the sum is 90 degrees. Ang isa pa dito is complementary. Ang isa nito na is supplementary. Kapag supplementary class, kapag inad natin yung angles niya is 180 degrees. Review ng mga ng mga terms. Kapag supplementary, the sum of the angles is 180 degrees. Kapag complementary, kapag inad natin, 90 degrees siya. Do you follow? Nakuha? Okay? So, gawin natin na if-then form ulit. Gawin ulit natin na if-then form. So, we are talking about the measures of complementary angles. So, if the sum I'm sorry. In this case, dapat ibahin natin ng konti yung statement. The subject actually is complementary. Okay, angles. So we need to determine first the subject and then the predicate of the paragraph or the sentence. So if the angles are complementary, then the sum of the measures is 90 degrees. That's it. Naiintindihan nyo? Naiintindihan nyo, class? Okay? So, if the angles are complementary, then the sum of the measures is 90 degrees. Pwede rin nating gawin na if it is complementary angles, then the sum of the measures is 90 degrees. Pwede rin yun. But I think this is much or a lot better. If the angles are complementary, then the sum of the measures is 90 degrees. Okay, that's it. Then the converse statement. Yung converse statement natin, so meaning gagawin natin yung conclusion hypothesis. If the sum of the measures is 90 degrees, so if the sum of the measures is 90 degrees, then the angles are complementary. That's it. Then, for the inverse part, we have to negate the conditional statement. So, if the angles are not complementary, then complementary, then the sum of the measures is not 90 degrees. That's it. And for the contrapositive, we have to negate the converse statement. So, if the sum, ito lang, is not 90 degrees. If the sum is not 90 degrees, then the angles are not complementary. Okay, that's it. Do you follow? Okay. Another example or another example. Okay. Sige.
Sir, paano,
Yes.
paano po kapag number yun?
Kapag number, madali lang naman yan. Babalik ta rin nyo lang din naman yung number. Teka, hanap tayo ng example Kasi meron dyang hindi naman sa actually number, kundi mathematical statement siya. Let's see. Oops, not this one. Ito. Halimbawa. Ito. So, kung meron kayong hindi naintindihan na mga terms, dapat i-research nyo muna yung definition ng term. Oh. Ano yun? Parang hindi ko na-copy. 4x plus 5 equals 29. Then x equals 6. X plus 5 equals 29. So 4x plus 5 equals 29. 29, tama ba? When x equals 6. Yan. So gagawin lang muna natin siya na if-then statement. So if 4x plus 5 equals 29, then x is equal to 6 or equals 6. Simple as that. Then the converse, if x is equal to 6, then 4x plus 5 is equal to 29. And if x, and this one, if 4x plus 5, how do we negate statement like this one? So, di ba equal sign siya? Meaning, the negation of equals is not equal to. So, if x is not equal to 6, kasi walang symbol dito na not equal eh. If x is not equal to 6, saan ba yung not equal? Not equal. Saan ba yan? Ayan. If x is not equal to 6, ayan. Ito. Maliit lang siya ha. Huwag ko nang lakihan. Then, four x plus 5 is not equal to 29. Yan, ganyan. Then, ano lang, negation lang nito. So, if four x plus 5 is not equal to 29, then x is not equal to 6. That's it. Ganun lang kadali. In terms of truth value, so itry nyo. If 4x plus 5 equals 29, so eto, true naman yung mathematical statement. However, I don't know if the conclusion is false or true. I-substitute nyo dito. When x is equal to 6, so 4 times 6 is 24, plus 5 is equal to 29. Therefore, the conclusion is also true. The mathematical sentence is correct when x is equal to 6. So both the hypothesis and the conclusion is true. Therefore, the truth value is true. Simple as that. Are you following? Okay na? So, some more clarification. Another example pa ba or naiintindihan na? Okay na lahat? So, hindi na kailangan ng another example. Okay na? Okay. So, if that's the case, so I think we'll end our discussion here unless you have further questions or clarifications. If you have any. Wala na? Okay. So that ends our discussion this morning. And thank you for attending our online class again. So, time for our lunch. So, good day and good vibes.